And then I just want to give you the name of the 3 CPAs whose advice many of us drew from, and that's Mindy Eisenberg-Stark, Stephen Beer, and Carl Cesarno. Okay, and we do thank them for that. And there's 2 points I want to read on the accounting front. Corporation would probably want to put the expenses of cleanup, professional fees, and such below the line so as not to impact the income or loss from continuing operations. So you're going to want to talk to your CPAs about that. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
On to mold. Because if you're not prepared, or even if you are, you may end up with water intrusion. And I think the way you have to think about water intrusion is anytime there's water intrusion, you have to think of mold. Mold may be a 4-letter word, but you got to think about it and how to deal with it. There's an outline, I think, that was handed out. This is sort of a reprise of a talk I gave several years ago for Margie, and there's a lot of legal information in here, which I'm not going to bore you with. You can take it with you and read it. And it gives you some resources because EPA and the Department of Health have a lot of resources on mold. The idea is to avoid mold as best you can, which means that moisture control. You can't ignore any kind of moisture penetration. I have, beginning on page 3 of the outline, 4 steps. One is education, how you can educate your staff, as well as your residents and unit owners. Step 2 is a program of routine inspections and maintenance. Take a look, know what's going on. Don't ignore situations that exist. The 3rd step is to develop the appropriate protocols. Just as we're talking about protocols for weather emergencies and for blackouts, you need protocols in place for water and mold remediation. Basically, the first thing you want to make sure you do is get the place dried out within 24 to 48 hours. If you can do that, you're probably going to avoid having a mold problem. And if you don't do that, it's going to be a problem for you. One of my clients had local law 11 work done, and unbeknownst to everyone, in the course of doing it, the contractor had pierced some heating pipes, which were, the contractor wasn't working off the as-built drawings. And in anchoring parts of the facade, it actually pierced the pipes. When the heating system was turned on at the beginning of the heating system, and the water started running through the pipes, I believe there were 50 apartments that were flooded. Many of them were unoccupied at the time, the tenants were out of town, whatever. Massive problem. 24 to 48 hours to dry out 50 apartments is just not doable. The board and the managing agent, upon learning of the problem, immediately called in a company to first do triage, see which apartments were the worst, and then start work. Fight about, obviously they notified their insurer, but they immediately started working in apartments and doing what they could, but picking out the order. So if you can't do it in 24 to 48 hours, at least, you know, pick out which apartments are the most damaged, deal with those first, and then go through. And they had actually an organized list. It was a condominium. There were arguments about, you know, who's responsible for paying for what and everything. And the board said, the heck with everything. We got to deal with the situation. will fight over liability down the road. And it all worked out fine. There was not one lawsuit over it. Insurance company actually stepped up to the plate, and it was okay. There was mold in some of the apartments. It was taken care of. I remember a call from one of the board members who said he had a mushroom growing on his wall. And unfortunately, that was the case. But you could deal with it. And so, try for the 24, 48 hours. If not, you got to do your triage or whatever. That raises an issue, by the way, that in buildings where the leak is in one unit, something like that, and you have people who are snowbirds or what have you, there should be some kind of protocol for checking on apartments. Some buildings actually require people who are out of town for an extended period of time to have the name of provide the name of someone who is going to check on their apartment on a regular basis, because if they're not reporting the damage to you quickly, then there may be mold growing. The last item is on your record keeping. And I have, now that my firm is part of Montgomery, I have the luxury of having a number of partners who handle environmental issues. I have one partner who goes throughout the country advising and defending against mold claims, but he advises on various entities, and he's done it for some of my co-ops as well, on how to avoid those claims. Another one deals with oil spills, and they're very concerned, and they've told me some horror stories about building records. You should keep records of what you did, but there should not be any speculation about the cause of a condition or the possible adverse health facts. It's, as they used to say, and you know, on TV, the facts, ma'am, nothing but the facts. So it's, this is the day it occurred, this is what we did, this is the professional who was involved, and that the work is been completed, and we've now done testing after the work and confirmed that everything is okay. So that's really a very important part, but somebody has to focus on what's going into that record keeping. The record keeping will be very important down the road if there are any claims made. But if it has, the record keeping has what I would call editorial comment or speculation, it's only going to get you in trouble. So hopefully you're going to keep your buildings in terrific shape and you're never going to have to deal with mold, but if you do, these are the steps you should take. And I have, in the back of the outline is something that is been published by EPA with a variety of steps that you can take as well, and what the various protocols are will help you develop it. That's it.
That you keep track of all your activities once mold is detected. And that is the beauty of fast information. Because when you do this, NYARM sells these for $150 each. I recommend that every maintenance worker should have one in their back pocket. So it's at the moment they see something they don't like. We don't know what it is. They take a swab of it, okay? Very simple. You go through there. The instructions in the past were, you go back to your office, you get some Scotch tape, try to tape it up there. It's very difficult to do. And then find a lab who's going to take it from you. So these are prepaid, $150. Then your cost, you overnight it to the lab in Texas. The next day, within 24 hours, you get an email of the result. We test for over 150 organisms. This is not asbestos or lead or anything like that. So it's something that is an organism. So when this is over, in the back, if you would raise your hand, Roger and Marty, okay? Roger and Marty are here. They're the principals of the company, and they'll be able to talk to you about it. And I would also like to introduce Great Eastern Energy, who will keep you in compliance with all your energy issues, okay? And we have Recovery Judgment, which is a law firm that specializes in collections, and that applies to everyone here. So whether you own a company that works for a building, or if you are a building, you can use their services. Okay. And then this table right here, the four gentlemen can raise your hand. There's Howard and Hecht is one of the companies, and Continuity Dynamics, please talk to them afterwards, because what they do is exactly what Phyllis was talking about with reference to the emergency plans that you have to create in the continuity of your building or your business during an emergency. Okay, that's that. And so at this point, 32BJ to give us an essence of what they're training the staff.
Thank you for having me, Margie. My name is Richard Harris. I'm from the 32BJ Training Fund. We are a separate nonprofit 401c3 from the union. We train exclusively local 32BJ members. So your superintendents, your resident managers, and your commercial cleaners are just some of the members that we have here in the city. After Hurricane Sandy last year, both management and the union came together about what to do with disaster preparedness. We know that a lot of management companies had some plans, but a lot didn't have disaster manuals or anything in place that would help them before, during, and after an emergency. So we've set up a class for that. It's a 3-hour seminar. It's not meant to be exhaustive. It's just meant to get the ball rolling, the conversation started, so that before the next emergency happens, management companies and employees have something in place that they can go to and make sure that the tenants in their buildings are aware of what's going on. And so we like to have it so that the 3-hour seminar isn't just us talking, it's more of a back and forth, an interactive seminar where we get feedback from the members. So we may ask them, well, do you have glow sticks in case the emergency lighting goes out? Because how long can you really think that the emergency lighting is going to stay? Sometimes they'll come back and say, oh, well, it's only going to last out 3 to 4 hours. Do you have glow sticks in place? Why shouldn't you use candles during emergency? So we get into a lot of these things that we talked about with the guidelines that are in place. So before an emergency, do you have everything written down or scanned so that you know who's in the building, who's not, so that after or during the emergency, you're aware of what's going on. During the emergency, what are some things that you're going to have in place? How do you react to what's going on in the news to make sure that you're at the forefront and ready to go when something happens? After, one of our sample questions is, how do you know when you're allowed to go back into the building or allow tenants back in if you've been evacuated? And it's a simple answer, but you know, somebody might think, oh, if the superintendent says it's okay, then we can go back in the building. When in truth, it's the Department of Buildings who has the final say to say, if we evacuated the building, then they're the ones who are going to let you back in. And so after, we also get into how you restart the building, how you get things back to where they were from before. And again, it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's meant for the building managers to get that information first, so that when they come to you as a management company and you're talking about your plans and what you guys want to do, they're already aware of what's going on. So I'll be here. We have some flyers to give out, and any information that you need, you can feel free to ask me any questions.
Okay, Stephen, did you have a comment or a question? Please. Good.
The part I heard was about planning, and one of the things that is really important as us as outside accountants with you folks as property managers is sort of things like are coming up this time of year, that we do the budget process and we're seeing a deficit for 2013, and mostly we're seeing everybody focuses on what do we need to do to 14. But what doesn't always happen is what do we do about the deficit for 13? And that's one of the issues in the selling guide, is recurring deficits, or the missing 10%. We talked about the funding for the reserves earlier in the presentation. And that's what I guess I want everybody to think about. As part of our work, we try to get the information, do the planning. We sort of call it dressing up the financial statement to make it the best possible presentation for the lender, for prospective buyers. And we're hearing that that's not always happening, that accountants and accounting is looked at after the fact. Well, that's what the numbers were. Well, we find out in March that we had this big deficit, Now the financial statement doesn't look good to the board, doesn't look good to the banks and the lenders, prospective purchasers. So I'd just like you guys to hear the part that was in the presentations about planning, that it's important to take a look at that and try to think of that and work with your accountants and your financial people within your management firms to try to get the best possible picture out there so that these loans do qualify as best they can.
Okay, so after the session, Alex, I just want you to raise your hand because if any of you have any engineering questions or any engineering issues, make use of his knowledge. And at every lunch, or every function, we serve kosher food, but you have to ask Helen. And the reason you have to ask Helen is because everyone goes for the kosher food and they're not kosher. And so she gets to decide if you're qualified or not.
Talk about profiling.
So thank you, Helen Kerpak. Thank you, Frida D. Thank you, Rashad Adams. So with that, I hope to see you all on January 25th, which is our annual gala, our honorary gala at Leonard's of Great Neck. It truly is the best party in the industry. And then watch our website for all our fabulous programs coming up throughout the year. Thank you very much.
But we continued work and
Well, our lab was the first commercial DNA testing laboratory in the United States. We opened up in 1991, and we were recognized as the industry leader in the identification and detection of insects, pests, rodents, organisms, bacteria, all these types of components. So we've been doing this for many, many years, in excess of 20, starting with the federal government, all the way down to having 93% of the veterinarian business in the United States. We receive samples every day from all over the world, and we are regarded as the leading expert in what we do. Bug Lab came along and decided that it was now time, given what it was going on in the environment, to take these applied technologies and take them out of the laboratory and apply them into everyday living situations. So we are now testing all environments for things like MRSA, bacteria, mold.
What about Legionnaires?
Legionnaires disease and water supplies.
Good.
Bed bugs, fleas, ticks. So we are able to do things that most laboratories cannot do. And although there are some laboratories that do some of what we do, we have a proprietary testing that allows us to do in hours what it takes them days, weeks, or months to do.
Okay, so when you say what they can't do, meaning you found a methodology that gets the results?
Well, it's a couple of different things. First of all, the ability to be able to do faster testing is dependent upon having equipment that is generally 10 times more expensive than the standard equipment being utilized by most facilities.
Okay.
It also requires enhanced and additional training over long periods of time, and a lot of it is kind of trial and error.
Okay.
It's also a lot of computer programming. But the real secret to what we've been able to do over the last 20 years is we have been able to enhance the process by which components of the DNA are extrapolated from the sample and tested. And because we have reworked this process, the re-engineering of this now not only makes our testing faster process, but it gives us more information that is more enhanced and more in-depth. So we can tell you things like how much of an infestation you have, how much of a concentration it is, and give you directions on what it is you need to be able to remediate the problem.
Okay. So that in the back end at the lab. So apparently, then you've made this convenient method to get it to the lab. So that makes the lab uber fabulous. So now, rather than as a building manager for years, we would take the Scotch tape and try to what is that? Take the Scotch tape, put it in something, and then try to find a lab to handle
We
it.
can, this is very convenient. We're testing everything from kitchens for salmonella.
Okay.
We're testing
surfaces.
mold, so
Okay.
any kind of surface. You can use this to go into a ventilation shaft, go into a ventilation or an air return. Okay, you can use this to go on counters, baseboards, under sinks, into tight areas and walls. You can use this basically anywhere in any environment. You can do it in an office, you can do it on a desk, you can do it on a chair, you can do it anywhere.
Okay, so it's surfaces, and so while you the disease organism or the organism, it's not what it isn't. So the public doesn't misunderstand. We're not testing, me to find out if I've got a bacteria somewhere. You're not testing the person having something. You're testing a surface. The surface could be on
The surface could be, but basically we are testing environments and we are testing humans externally. Okay? We are not a medical testing facility. We are an environment and veterinary testing facility. So we test things that are on surfaces, we are testing things that are in the air, and we are the expert for anything that is an animal insect pest.
So if a landlord has a rule against no dogs,
yes,
and he wants to test to see if there's been dog DNA, bingo.
absolutely. This test is very sensitive. First of all, we test for saliva, dander, blood, feces, and urine. So these are all the different things. This test is so sensitive that if you wake up in the morning and you notice that you've been bitten in the morning, if it's been less than 8 hours and you have not treated the bite, you can actually swab the skin and get actually a sample of dander or a sample of saliva and put it in this, and we will be able to tell you exactly what it is that bit you.
That's great. Now, in the environment sector, there's what's referred to as a third-party tester, and I see, and now a third-party tester may use this, but I don't see this as replacing the need for a third-party tester. So while a building staff person, the first sight, it's really first sight, building staff person, first sense, should take a sample.
Well, what this is this gives it. This is simple enough and quick enough that it can be used by anyone, any place. Now, we restrict access to this because certain tests we believe should only be performed by people who have certain experiences in certain areas. So we limit what tests are available to be purchased by whom. This test absolutely could and should be utilized by somebody who is very expensive, very experienced, and does this as a course of maybe some sort of legal proceeding, because our test is more sensitive and it is a quicker process. But the design was with the idea that routine maintenance workers, building owners, people of this nature would be utilized.
Right, exactly, and that's and the sooner, because every position piece that an attorney might write on environmental lawsuits, the sooner you know, then the sooner you can react and you abate it accordingly. So in the end, it's when you need that third-party test. So a third-party testing company may use this, or they may use their own method to collect it. This is a collecting method, but it's really about the early detection.
It's all about the early detection.
By making it convenient,
right,
then you're more prone to have the early detection.
Well, first of all, you're limiting the negative impact of early detection, and you are also limiting the cost of remediation and the issues that go with it. Bed bugs, for instance. If you catch it early when it's in your apartment, you're talking about one level of treatment. If it's spread through the walls into other units, you're talking about a whole nother level of problem solving, which is increased time, increased expense, inconvenience, lawsuits.
Right. I mean, bed bugs can empty a building. Legionnaires certainly can empty a building.
Absolutely.
We've seen it happen time and time again.
Sure.
And so in theory, every contractor, every mechanic should have one in their bed pocket, because if you're right there in the air conditioning system, you're not going to go back there. You're there, this is handy, you reach for it.
And that's the reason that we chose this design, was for that very reason.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you, and we will continue this.
Director of New York. and even help along with our colleagues start.
Do I have a card?
Property manager.
Excellent.